executive session to get all of this done?
We don't have a choice.
Right.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Well, everybody knows the issues with pensions. Everybody knows the issues with Medicaid. I think not only do we know them, but I think we need to accept the fact that we need to do more than just talk about them and say these things need to be on the table. We need to have something in concrete form. We need to pass it. And on Medicaid, it's critical that the governor needs to make a commitment to not only have a bill introduced, but have a bill passed, but to also be actively engaged in working with the federal government to implement these changes. You'll look at what Governor Cuomo's done. He has had 20 waivers approved by the federal government on Medicaid reform they've done in the state of New York, with another 32 pending. At this point, I'm not aware of any that have passed that have come out of our administration. So he needs to be aggressive, he needs to be proactive, and it needs to be more than just talking about Medicaid reform, but implementing it at the federal level to make sure it's in place.
Right, and the waivers have not been filed yet on the changes that were passed last spring. There's been a letter that's been drafted saying we're going to move forward, but the actual filing of the plan amendment, which needs to happen, has not yet been done.
And this is an important issue because this is a lot of money involved in this. And to just simply say we did bipartisan Medicaid reform sounds good, but it means nothing if we don't engage the federal government. And he has that duty and that responsibility as the governor and CEO of the state to get that done. And to date, I would say he has done anything but that, and he needs to engage in that and make a commitment to do that.
Was this the right approach to say that Medicaid and pensions are huge issues and we're going to have working groups and come up with details? Should he have said in this speech, here's what I'm proposing we do? I mean, he sort of said what he thinks we should do, but he didn't say we should definitely push the pension cost to the locals, and we should definitely, lower rates to doctors, et cetera, et cetera. Should he have said those things? What would your reaction have been if he had?
Well, I think we need to know what direction he's headed. I mean, that's kind of the role of the governor, is to provide some leadership, and that's what's been lacking here. He's relying entirely on these pension and Medicaid working groups, which I think all members who are on those are trying to work in good faith to get something done. But we really have not had engagement from the governor's office.
He definitely needs to be engaged. He's the governor. He's the leader. Are you for having employees pay a little more? Are you for cost shifting? Or are you for addressing the COLA issue? He said they're all on the table, but what's he want? I mean, this is not new stuff. This has been around for quite a while. There have been bills out there. We fall into these lines of, well, we have to do something constitutional. That's a given. All right, we all want to try to do that, but we also have to accept the fact probably that whatever we do, it's going to end up in court. So tell us what you want. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you want to pass. Be the governor and introduce some legislation, and we'll work off it.
Is there a line in the sand on this whole idea of a pension shift? Is that someplace that your caucus just won't go?
Chris
No.
addressed it a little while ago. We're like them. If there's a comprehensive approach to pensions and all the things are truly in the mix and everybody's got a little skin in the game, we're willing to have that discussion. But to simply say we're going to shift the cost to locals or shift the cost to colleges with not anything else done in a significant way, that's merely a property tax increase at the local level. We're not on that program.
Was the governor accurate in your view when he said that his budget cut spending about $400 million less than this year?
By what?
About $400 million less than this year.
If you
I don't believe he is accurate.
Yeah, if you look at his documents, and that are right here, and I think Patty's got a copy for everybody, we all know that the General Assembly passed a budget last year out of both chambers. It ended up on his desk that he signed at 33.2. He's showing a number this year of 32.7, 32.8. It's a $500 million increase. These are his numbers, and we're not making these up. We went off his document. It's very clear.
Where would the rest of that money come from, though? I mean, that's largely because when it has this pension payment, where would you make cuts in addition to what Governor Quinn has already listed out?
I don't think we've ever said this is solved with cuts. I think Republicans have said for a number of years now that structural reform in state government is where the big savings are, and that's pensions, that's Medicaid. At least he's finally admitting that, yes, we need to do those things. So that's a step in the right direction. The problem's going to be, will he actually execute on those things to get the savings that we need? So there are still, though, interestingly, he freely admits to some increased spending. I mean, another $50 million to MAP, $20 million to early childhood. There's a almost 200% increase in the Department of Violence Prevention, which is a very, the neighborhood recovery program, which is one that has been very poorly audited or followed little criteria. So there's still, he freely admits to increased spending. So there's some of that, but that won't solve the problem.
It's ironic that when it comes to spending, he can be very specific. When it comes to the tough decisions and the tough reform ideas, I see no specifics. And there's as I said, it's quite ironic to say the least.
If Medicaid and pension is solved this year, the deadlines were met, he said no more dithering, it has to be done this year. Is the spending portion something that you're on board with, or do you take any umbrage with, as you talked about, those increases?
I
those
did.
Are wrong priorities?
Yeah, we cannot increase spending, period, the end, right now. We just can't do it. So those things ought to be off the table. We need to focus on the big issues at hand. And once those are solved, then we can look at if other things that need to be done within state government.
Can you respond to the Illinois Hospital Association says it's cut of $2.7 billion in Medicaid spending. One is just kicking the can down the road, and secondly, it's kind of pulling the rug out from underneath them. It'll result in some hospitals closing down around the state, and likely in the worst served areas that have the most in Medicaid income. What's your reaction? Should we, if we're going to cut $2.7 billion, should we do it in 1 year? Should we phase it in? Because the hospital administrators are also trying to deal with the uncertainties of the Obamacare.
Well, first of all, rate cuts is not going to solve the Medicaid problem. At best, if you just cut them as far as you could, it's about $500 million. The real savings has to be in looking at services and populations, and the populations have expanded. The population on Medicaid has doubled in 10 years. That has got to be rolled back. So rate cuts, again, probably will be a part of the mix, but we're very cognizant of the fact that if you cut the rate so much that providers leave the program, it has a detrimental impact. So while that needs to be on the table, that is not the solution.
And I also think you've got a number of things that I think that we have passed, that we can certainly get to you, that again, he has not taken that active step and gone and initiated the waiver process. And that would help us tremendously if he would engage in that. It's more than just passing bills, as I said earlier.
Is $2.7 billion the right number there? Does it need more or does it need less? What is your view on that?
Well, what that does is allow us to pay for the liability we've incurred. I mean, so if you pay less, you push if you have less in savings, you push bills further down the road again.
But is that what we should cut, or should we cut more? Is what I'm asking.
Well, I'd be happy if we cut 2.7. That would be a huge
If we
step
can
in the
get
right
there.
direction.
What about this concept of business tax loopholes and wanting to look for that? Have you noticed any in the tax code, or this obviously comes on the heels of this CME, Sears, et cetera? Wouldn't people consider those at least some form of perhaps loophole, or what have you?
Sure, we should always be open to looking at and reviewing the tax code, and I think we've indicated our willingness to do that. Again, the magnitude of savings that you would get from doing that isn't going to solve the problem. So we're certainly open to looking, though.
What is your need? You mentioned one specific on that, the oil tariff.
Right.
What is your thoughts on that one specific thing?
I don't know enough about it to say yay or nay, but I'm certainly willing to look at it.
Does it surprise you only gave one specific after all this talk of loopholes?
Not really, because a lot of times those loopholes get run up the flagpole, and when we look at them, we find out why they're in place, either because other states do it and it keeps us competitive, or there actually is some economic advantage to having what they call the loophole, or you might call a tax break of some sort.
What do you think of the proposed closing that he has, the 24 local offices, facilities, the TAMs and others? Do you think, A, that would pass the chambers, and B, in seeing that list, do you see any political selection in that, or did he pretty much pick it along economic lines?
I think I tried to address this earlier. I think it's a fair discussion to have. I think you have to, everything should be on the table. It needs to be in a thoughtful, deliberate approach. What do you do with the facilities once you close them? What do you do with the people that are serviced by those facilities? What do you do about the employees? And where do you put them? But consolidation, elimination, I think you have to have those conversations. I can't tell you. I'm not in a position to tell you each specific place he's talked about, but there are people on a professional basis that will tell us what works and what doesn't work. I think he's made it clear, his own folks had said it takes a while to go through this exercise, maybe as long as a year, but I think you gotta have this conversation. Everything's on the table.
And